Really and truly, Mike, you are in the conflict resolution business.
Well, yeah, that's what I've realized. That's kind of the world that I've lived in and I live in, and it's been just an ongoing journey of growing, serving.
Okay, say no more and stop right there. Stop
That's
right
right. We're
there.
about to start the podcast
Okay.
before we start.
Yeah. This is how it starts. Okay.
Okay.
All right. We're gonna put Mike into the waiting room.
Yeah, yeah, and then so be ready. We'll pull you back in. We're just going to do the intro for it,
Sure.
and then we'll bring you in and introduce you to everybody.
Yeah, I'll just follow you. I'll just follow your guys' lead for sure.
Perfect. All right, let me find. There you go. Put it in the waiting room. So we're going to put you in there. I don't think there's any music going, which you might be thankful for. So I don't
Because
know.
we argue about that all the time.
It's just silent. So all right, we'll see you, man. See you in a minute.
Okay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Faitheism Project podcast. This is number 42. Whoa, mind blown. And they said we'd never do.
That's right. They said we'd never do it. No, we need to plan something for the 50th. I think. So let's start thinking about it now. We just got 8 more to go. So, all right.
That's a great idea. I love that idea. How was your week?
It was good. I was gone. I was recreating at about 9,000 feet above where I am now in Mammoth Lakes, and it was awesome. And so today's kind of a get my head back into LA day, which I always like giving myself some time because by the time I drove the whole way back and hit traffic right before on the 5 right before my house, it was like no. So it's nice to have a day just to be like, all right, it's not so bad here. Yes, it's not quite as pretty, and there's more traffic and blah blah blah. But so that's what today's about.
And then that LA thing takes hold of you again, and you it just sucks you right back in.
That's right. Exactly.
Someone should write a book about it or a TV series or something. Oh, don't get us started. So strangely enough, this podcast kind of fell from the sky in a way. We have a guest today who someone that Randy will introduce as they have a prior relationship. But strangely enough, it's a continuation of the conversation that we started a couple of podcasts back, having to do with spirituality and the healing process, which of course they go hand in hand, but how to make them go hand in hand the best they possibly can. That's really the trick. With that in mind, this Mike Harbert is how do we know Mike?
Well, I actually got to know him while I was in training to be a pastor. We were both in the same class at the same time that we did that.
And in Pasadena?
In Pasadena. And we were also in a group together where, we shared a lot of deep stuff and, prayed for each other, helped each other move forward. But then our paths, parted when I went to Mozambique to be ordained, and he went into ministry here in the US. But then our paths crossed back together again just a few years ago, as he started working with me as I was trying to help churches adapt to the new context we find ourselves in, because we ran into lots of dysfunctional institutions, not just in churches. Others of you may have experienced dysfunctional institutions in our society today, but churches have certainly reflected that. And I needed somebody that could come in and really help us deal with hot situations,
Right.
like where things were on fire in terms of people's relationships. And he's skilled at it.
When you say in terms of relationships inside those church communities.
Yeah, you could have people that had known each other for years, had worked together for years, but some issues had come up that were very serious about the future and direction of the church and leadership of the church. And the vitriol that could come out of that, and the inability to figure out how to actually come back together again, could really
kind of like Catholics and Protestants.
Exactly. That's the thing. I mean, you've got it's these situations where, I mean, even if you go back pre-Newt Gingrich, you had, Republicans and Democrats in the House working together, but then from that point they kind of have more and more, to where they are today. And
Yes.
The question is, how do you get people to actually have
By
substance?
the way, I agree. I agree 100% with your inflection point.
Yes. Well,
I absolutely agree. Yes, something changed when that man did what he did.
Well, there's this book I'm reading. We've got to get to Mike, but there's this book I'm reading called The Coddling.
Oh yeah, that's right. We have a guest.
Yeah, that's right. Have you heard of The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt, NYU prof, and another guy? But anyway, that's where I got that from. Is that he's looking deep into how did we end up where we are right now, and that was one of the points that he made, was there was a serious shift in the House of Representatives for particular reasons. But anyway, so all that to say that's the thing, is what Mike does is the very grassroots kind of stuff that really we've talked about love your neighbor, as yourself.
It has come up.
That's right. So the stuff that Mike is doing is actually, what does that actually look like when you are ticked off at each other? How do you work through that to something useful? So I'm looking forward to
How do you apply that in the real world when no one's feeling it?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a great idea. It's a great slogan. It could even be a great bumper sticker. But what about reality? What about in real life? So I'm excited for everybody, because I think Mike's going to really give us some specifics and some tools and some things we can use to be reconcilers in our own lives too. So
bring this man into the room.
Let's do it. Let's get him in here.
Get in here.
Here comes Mike. All right, my man. So we have primed people. They are excited for you. They can't wait. And I just want to add to what I was saying, which, to me, Mike is the ultimate fireman, because he can walk into a room of people that are on fire. He can go into situations where angels fear to tread, as they say. And yet he has the tools and the experience to really give the opportunity for that room to begin to change from the destructive types of fires that build between people to something that moves toward reconciliation. So I am excited, Mike, that you're here with us.
Where should we send this sainthood paperwork, Mike?
I'm telling you, man, I'm telling you. So, that's the thing.
Except you guys don't do sainthood, do you? Oh, that's right. I got the wrong group again. I keep confusing you all.
Well, no, we do sainthood.
You all look alike to me,
We do sainthood. It's just we see it as a more of a grassroots thing rather than, we are saints because of what has been done for us, less than, But Mike would definitely be on that list if I was a Catholic, because of the focus of his work. And there's such a huge need, not just in our churches, but in our society for this kind of stuff. So I can't wait to hear what Mike has to share with us.
Now, how did you, you and Mike, of course, met quite a long time ago.
Yes. Yeah. I told him we met in seminary. So yeah.
And in the years in between, Mike, now we've heard the various stories of what Randy did. Man,
whoa, yeah.
What was your whoa?
Well, I want to say it is good to know that I knew Randy when he had hair.
It is true, and he can testify to the fact. He can be a witness.
That's right.
I did have hair.
I saw a picture. We saw a picture last podcast. If you watch the YouTube version. And Randy was a very handsome lad.
Yeah. I was for a time, and I am thankful.
Very pretty.
Yes. No, Randy, you still are. You just don't have as much hair. That's all.
That's true.
You're pretty in a different way.
Yes. But no, Randy and we got to know each other really well because we were in what's called a covenant group, or just kind of sharing life, when we all were just getting started in our profession right out of seminary.
Now, let me take a step back, Mike.
Yeah.
When did the calling to to follow this particular line of work. When did it hit you? I mean, we've heard Randy's story, but how far back did you feel it?
Well, there's lots of ways I can answer that question, but I guess the way I would say it related to my experience is even though I grew up in a church going family, I did not really have the kind of encounter with God Randy was talking about in his stories last time, where it was real for me until I was in high school. So I was still young. I'd left the church. I didn't have to go to church in high school. That was a big relief for me. My dad's dad was a pastor. He had to go to church all the way until they left the home. So my dad said, I'm not going to do that to Mike. So he didn't make me go in high
When
school.
when you say left the church,
Yeah, yeah.
in your mind, what did that mean?
I didn't see any relevance for what the church was offering to me. And I felt like kind of what you all have been talking about in your podcasts. I felt, hey, I can do better in my own head by myself, and I'm going to go out into the world and I'm going to figure this out. And so I think it was a good thing that my dad and mom said, okay, we're going to give you some freedom to do that. You're an adolescent, you're in high school. So,
It didn't turn out badly, it turns out.
well, I got myself in some pretty deep holes, as can happen,
As one does.
as we tend to do, and that's where
What
I
would you
ha-
describe as a deep hole, if I may pry?
I made choices based on my desire for finding significance and relevance in the world, through, as often happens with teenagers, through how my peers viewed me. And
Understood.
so I allowed myself into situations, experiences, in pursuit of them validating my existence. And so that did not go well. I ended up getting involved in lots of things that were actually life sucking instead of life giving,
Hmm.
to the point where I was pretty lost and I was pretty in a pretty dark place. If I could show you my picture of my student card in my sophomore year, you would know what I'm talking about. I
Sure, sure, sure.
I was not a happy guy, and yet I persisted in that for about 3 years.
Yours was a misspent youth.
Yeah, it was. Those are the hardest years of my life, for sure.
Mhm.
And but by God's grace, that's kind of a big word we use, but by the grace of God, God basically just came and helped me come to understand the reality of who God actually is, not in a religious way, but in a relational way, through other people who were experiencing that relationship, and they kind of embodied that, and they loved me in a way that had nothing to do with how I was treating them.
Sure.
And so they basically won my trust, and then I was curious, and then I got involved in some things that opened me up to then entering into a relationship with God that I just had not had. And then from then on, basically my senior year of high school on, I really just wanted to grow in that relationship, and one thing led to the next.
So you suddenly you rediscovered that community
Uh huh.
and you found a communion with that community, in essence.
Well, I discovered what the church is, what I believe it's actually meant to be. It's an actual family of people who actually care for each other.
Mhm.
And the crazy thing about it, as a senior in high school, the people that I fell into this community with, who were sharing this journey of growing in this relationship with God, with each other, I was hanging out with students that up until that time I would have never hung out with before. They were in other peer groups that were seen as less, however you want to define that, less popular. And but I just began to wake up to the reality of, wow, these people actually care for me in a way that these other so-called friends really never did. And so everything shifted. And so I think that's what the church is. It's a family of people that are trying to grow in our relationship with our Creator, and also to walk with each other. And then that's what Randy and I experienced when we met each
Sure.
other with some other people later. Yeah.
And then, all right, as we sit here today, you have spent a lot of the past years.
Hmm.
What would you describe your job title, job description as? What's on your business card?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call myself whatever Randy called me, the fire something. What was
Fire-
that?
The fire, he
The
should call you the fire
fireman, the
chief,
fireman.
yeah.
Um,
A
I,
spiritual fireman.
yeah, even though there's truth to that, because looking around the world today, with all that's gone on in the last year or so, there's a lot of fires that need to be dealt with relationally. But
Indeed.
I would just call myself a pastor, uh, because that's really what I've been for years. And the way I view a pastor is really in the historic traditional sense. That's not often the case in the more what you might call evangelical church. Uh, it's more what you'd call a soul friend. That you're just in a journey with others. You're a listening presence to people, creating safe spaces, so that how you are with them allows them to feel like they can be themselves.
One does not need an institutional church,
Yeah,
an institution with bricks, mortar, and all that stuff to do what you're doing.
yeah, exactly.
And that's straight from Jesus. Is really he said you really don't even need
Right.
the intermediary. You can speak directly to God.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
He said, he said, you are now the temple of the living God. Basically,
there you
I
go.
live
Exactly. So
wherever you go, there I am. So,
indeed.
yeah.
So uh, as we were talking just before we started talking, I used the words conflict resolution
Hmm.
to describe what it is that you do, and you didn't leap to it. You didn't go, yes, that's exactly what I did. You kind of went, yeah. You kind of surrendered to it.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I'm kind of curious to know why why was that more like a surrender to the thought that it's conflict resolution and not what as you started down the path when it was a little rosier perhaps what how would you have described it then?
Well, for me, it's a journey. It's when I think of my life, my journey in my relationship with God, the living God. It's been this journey of moving into reconciliation with myself,
Mm-hmm.
making peace within my own soul,
Mm-hmm.
and then out of that space, finding ways to give that gift, bring that gift into the lives of other people. And so it's all really about being in relationship in a way that's authentic, that's honest,
Huh.
that's self-aware, that's self-reflective, that's non-defensive, that's open. All the stories Randy shared last time, your experience with the horse, I love that. How you described your experience of kind of letting go of yourself so you could be open to another being, in this case, a horse. But see, I totally believe that when I heard you tell that story, because I think whether it's an animal, whether it's a person, I think the other being we're with senses what's going on within our person.
We are animals. We have a lot of these senses. We just don't trust them quite as much as perhaps we should. We often get sense, as we look at each other, and why this would be a more pleasant experience if we all got to sit in a room together.
Yeah.
Like, and someday we will all get to do that, is because there's so much information that passes between two people who are communicating non-verbally in so much information in so many ways that as we sit here, we're missing it. We're literally being limited to what's in this little box.
Yeah.
So much information is not passing between us, and it's frustrating. It's the subtle stuff that we'll get back there.
Yeah.
You said something initially that I absolutely agree with completely, that you've got to be honest with yourself
Mhm. Mhm.
first and foremost.
Mhm.
The process really begins with you, and you've until the moment comes that you can really, really
Mm-hmm.
be honest with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is kabuki.
Yeah.
You're putting on a show for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You know better, so it can't be for you.
Right.
So,
Right. And for me, I thought I was living honestly with myself
mhm.
uh, until I was, say, in my mid 30s. It was after I'd met Randy. I was doing the best I could to be the person that I wanted to be based on what I knew about myself and the world and so forth. But I actually was living in what you would call denial. And I wasn't woken up. That was kind of what I call my second conversion experience, where
what,
God,
what were you in denial of?
well, what I learned in a course in my doctoral studies, I didn't even know what denial meant. I thought denial was you know it's there within yourself and you're purposefully ignoring it.
Hmm.
You're dancing around it, you're avoiding it. But what I learned was true denial is we have things within us that others can see, but we ourselves don't see it. We are actually blind to things we carry from our childhood, from whatever we brought with us, that's made us who we are.
Mm.
And even though I was fully committed to living honestly as I could, the story. It's just a quick story. I was given a battery of psychological tests for this doctoral class, and when we got there the first day, it was a 2-week intensive. They passed out the results. The professor passed out the results, and he said, if you have an inverted V on your results, that means you're in denial. And I had a major, right, so obvious inverted V on my results. And I literally had a physiological reaction.
Oh no!
My heart started beating faster.
Oh no!
I started sweating. I got agitated as he's explaining this. The reason was because within my own mind, within myself, as honestly as I knew, I was honest when I took that test. And I came to the class because I really wanted to grow in self-knowledge. That was all very genuine. And so I went up to this professor at the break and I expressed my confusion. And he just very gently, this wise older man just said, you know what, you're going to be here for 2 weeks. You're going to be in a small group. You're going to learn a lot. Just be open and see what happens. And this was one of those experiences Randy was talking about last week that I've also had. That night I was wrestling in prayer because I had a relationship with God that was very real to me. And I was just wrestling with God. Lord, what was that about? And this voice came up from within me that I've recognized occasionally happens. It's not my thought. It's a different sense of presence and a thought. And the thought was, Mike, you don't understand the depth of your need. You're just as needy as a drunk on the street, but you don't see that. You don't understand that. I see everything that's deep inside of you, and I want to show you. I want to open that up to you, but you have to be willing. You have to want to go there. I can't take you there if you're not willing to go there. And so fortunately, I did trust God. For me, God was the safest presence in my whole life. And so I just kind of like when Randy was telling stories about being over in Africa, it's like, okay, if that's what you want, I trust you, but I don't. So here we go. I'm jumping off this cliff. We'll see where we end up. But that was one of those, that's why I call it kind of a second Damascus Road kind of thing where, okay. And then the next day I was in my small group and I told them the story and I said, you need to understand, I'm going to be flat out honest with you about anything that comes up in me when we're here together. And then that weekend, I went to my wife before we sadly went through divorce later. And I had to confess to her because for years she'd been saying, Mike, you have issues, you have stuff going on. And my response was a defensive response. It was, why do you have to be so negative? Why do you have to focus on the things that are less than what we would want? Why don't we focus on the things we can celebrate? You know, that typical reframing of reality. And so I had to apologize to her, and she appreciated that, and we got in therapy for a couple years after that. That entered into a much deeper journey of my working with a therapist's help, to get at things that I on my own wasn't able to get at. And So that started a whole nother journey.
Right.
Yeah.
I know that journey so
Yeah.
well.
Right.
Your journey and my journey are not terribly dissimilar, but there's something you've been holding. I won't go into mine. I've done that
Yeah. Yeah.
nauseum here, but yeah, no, I feel that particular pain where you are living a, yeah, hey, you're living a lie.
But I didn't know it. I didn't know it.
And is there a way, Mike? Two questions off of this. One is, what about somebody that's listening and says, "Pretty sure I get that inverted V too." What should they do?
Yeah, good question.
Well, this gets now to the other side of what I've been doing and what I do with people. Um,
Excellent question, Randy.
that again, I have to say, it always starts with myself. That's why the contemplative journey, the old desert experience you guys were talking about, has become significant for me, of learning contemplative practices of silence, solitude, stillness. Because I've learned through study and my own experience, we have to practice those things in order to get in touch, to actually open up to what's real inside, what's in our soul. And I think that's a major problem for people in our culture, is people are just going so fast. I think it's a form of self-defense against getting in touch with what's real. Because even though the whole contemplative prayer part of the history of Christianity, every Christian knows that. I'll invite people to go on a silent retreat for a couple of days, and they'll say, "I could never do that. I would go crazy if I couldn't be doing something." And people go on vacations and they just fill up all their time with busyness instead of just allowing for stillness and silence. And the reason is because we intuitively know there's stuff deep inside of us we don't want to get in touch with. And so I have to do that work myself. It's what I call my rule of life now. It's my way of life. So then I can be that, hopefully, that container.
As you said up front, Mike, the process must begin with the recognition
Of self.
of self.
Yeah, and then what you're doing is you're inviting. Back to your question, Randy. When I sit with people, let's say I'm invited into a church, which I am right now helping another church as part of my job, quote. Church that's major conflict, lots of unresolved stuff. The staff are in conflict. It's a mess, and this is all too common. And I go in, and what I do first is I say, I want to sit with each of you individually, because I realize there's no way I can facilitate an honest conversation with those of you who are in conflict.
Now, let me ask some practical questions here.
Yeah.
All right. So now, just so that our audience understands, what Mike does is a congregation, a Presbyterian congregation, will be having a crisis of some kind where its existence is threatened. Is it that bad?
Well, it basically it gets especially tricky and heated in churches and places of faith. It's just like what's going on.
It's a community in crisis.
It's like what's been going on for generations in Israel, where you have people who actually believe that they've been told by God to fight for something. And so for them, it's very, very personal, and they feel like it's a life calling. And so that goes on in the church. You get people who've been in faith for years, but they somehow take on this view that my perspective on this issue, like to be Republican or Democrat or whatever, you name it, how to deal with racial justice, whatever the issue may be, people will say, this is what I believe God is asking of me. And so they are very emotionally engaged in, quote, fighting for that right opinion. And then you have people who are in the same place, same church, who are on the other side of the issue.
And God isn't saying quite exactly the same message.
They're holding a very opposite view. And so what you have is two people or two groups that are literally fighting for something because they believe they're called by God to fight for it.
All right. This was a perfect explanation for what it is, the environment into which How did you describe that? That this it wasn't just a fireman. It was an angel of something or other. All right,
Right.
so this
Here
is
to tread. Yeah,
this
this
is
is where
hell,
angels here to tread,
this,
right?
Yeah.
this is the hellstorm into which you enter stage right.
Yeah. And you know what? I love doing this.
I
love doing
of course,
that.
you wouldn't be doing it otherwise, but
And
you're crazy.
the reason I love doing it is because I've experienced myself the amazing healing and growth I've experienced by leaning in to the things that are causing disruption in my life. It's only through my own journey of being
Sure.
helped to understand. It's only by being honest and saying, maybe just a therapist, whoever, help me see what's true. I'm struggling to see it because I'm defensive. I want to see it, but I can't see it. See, it's about desire. I have to want this if I'm going to be allowed to see this for what it actually is. And so basically what I do is I go in and I say to each individual, I want to sit with each of you, and I set up appointments with each person. I'm given a list of all the leaders, set up appointments, and I say the same thing to every person. I say, I want to hear your story based on your experience.
What would be the nature of these disagreements?
Or it could be anything.
For instance,
It could be over style of music. It could be over the pastor that was fired. Some people loved him. Why the heck did we fire him? It could be other people are saying he had to go or she had to go. They were killing our church. It's often there are so many issues.
it's
that
nuts
become
and bolts.
It's anything. It's anything that becomes personal to me. Anything that I value enough that I'll fight for it. So pick your poison. I mean, it could be anything. There's a passage in
I heard at one point carpet color in the sanctuary
Yeah.
as the source of a lot of tension. And I think that just highlights that. And it's, again, we're not talking about just in churches, because if you look in families,
Right,
if you get back to what was the key issue, a lot of times it's some little thing, but it just blew up
Yeah.
and became this issue. Like Mike said, that people are just like, I'm fighting for this. It's this or my death, that kind of approach.
Well, that's what leads to divorces. That's what leads to fallout in relationships, like you say, in families, between parents and kids, between work colleagues. Anytime you have people together in proximity on an ongoing basis, conflict happens. It just happens. Yeah.
What was the most, all right, inside your head, you would never show this to the room ever, ever, ever. But as you walked into the room, you thought, God, this is ridiculous.
I have to do my own inner work silently.
Of course you do.
That was such a good answer.
Of course you do. Good answer, but really.
And then I have to have someone that I can sit and,
Right.
and process things with myself. I need that somewhere else.
Of course.
Yeah, because I can't. If I'm going to be helpful to people, I can't be judging people.
Okay, but just so that we understand that you're human, dude.
Oh yeah, of course.
You've walked into the room and you've looked at them going total poker face, and you've thought inside your head, you people are all silly.
Yes, I definitely have to wrestle with that at times.
And perhaps you think if Jesus were in the room right now,
Well, he actually did.
this is not the point of the exercise, people.
Yeah, he actually did that. He actually said things like that to his own disciples. Like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Hey, I as devout atheist though I am,
Yeah.
I consider myself a huge fan. Oh, Jesus.
Hmm.
Even a humble atheist can do unto others.
Yeah.
And find that is a magnificent way to live one's life.
Yeah.
That actually, if you treat your neighbor the way that you'd like to be treated, wow, I get treated rather nicely most of the time. It works.
Yeah, it does, if we can pull it off.
Well, and that now what I'm hearing, just reflecting again, thinking, yes, church, but even wider, it sounds to me like you're saying that one of the key first steps in reconciliation is recognizing that even though you're sure 100% that you're on the righteous side, that there may be stuff going on inside of you that is part of the problem. Would you say that's a key part of the reconciliation process? Is you got to realize you're also part of the problem, or not? Am I putting words in your mouth?
Well, you need to help people get to self-reflection, but you can't start there.
Okay. So you start just by hearing what they're upset about,
Yeah.
but then you're trying to move them to a place where eventually they're going to be like, now, where is this coming from inside of me? And really trying to analyze that.
Yeah, it's back to what,
How do you achieve that kind of perspective? How do you get people? How do you pull the camera back that far enough for them that they can see the perspective that will allow them to do what it is, the work that they need to do?
yeah, let me just quickly describe the process because I think that'll help.
Okay.
What I've learned and what I've seen happen that helps people get to where you're asking, how do you help people get there? The reason I was saying I start with individual meetings is because typically when I go into these situations, whatever they are, is when people are in conflict, they're hurting, they're feeling that they have not been heard, they've not been understood, and so they're in a combative posture. Their dukes are up. They're not relaxed. And so they can't become self-reflective. They're in a combative posture, so it's more like this instead of like this. And so my first step is to help them go from this to this.
How do you talk them down off that ledge?
The way I do it is I go in and when I sit with a person, I say, it's an incredible privilege to be with you. And I find it a very sacred privilege to be able to hear your story, because your story, your perspective, your experience of all you've experienced that has led you to what you're feeling about the situation here is valid, and you need to have the opportunity to tell me your story, and I'm here just to listen. And I get out a pad and I say, I'm just going to take some notes because I want to capture and understand what's on your heart.
The word floating here is respect.
Well, it's respect.
That they need to feel respected. That they need to feel that they're being heard.
Yeah, exactly. They're feeling that I'm giving the dignity that every person deserves. Every person deserves equal dignity, no matter what we've done. And that's the beauty of Jesus. That's how Jesus received all people. That's why I think people that the religious leaders disqualified because of their, quote, performance or lack of performance religiously, Jesus made them feel safe, just where they were at, whoever they were, whatever they brought. And so that's why I think crowds flocked to him, because they sensed something about him, along with his authority and his healing power. But more than that, he was a welcoming, hospitable presence, which to me, that's what God is ultimately. God is love. And so it's giving that presence to every person. So then like I was with somebody just this week doing this, and I sat with this person, I said this to this person, and immediately she just broke into tears. She hadn't even said a word. And she said, nobody has allowed me this opportunity. Nobody has wanted to know what my feelings are about what's happened. I just feel like people are shooting at me, who are against me, who see me as a problem here. And so just giving her that dignity and that opportunity to share her story, and I think she could tell I actually meant it, which I do mean it, because I realize that's the entry point. I have to create safety for everyone, so they have that opportunity to tell their story. And it's amazing what happens, because then they tell their story and they're always honest. Once they realize, hey, this is between me and them, I'm not going to go talking with other people about this. It's just step one in the process. And everybody lets down. I've almost never experienced someone that won't tell me their story from their perspective, whatever it is. And then at the end of that session with each person, I'll say, if it's like in a Christian context, I'll say, I just want you to know how much I appreciate how you've shared honestly your heart, and that's really important. And I just want to pray for you that you will be enabled now to take your truth and then go spend some time and now try to listen to what the Spirit who lives in you is saying to you about your reality. So we go from understanding and expressing, articulating our reality based on the conflict or whatever it is, to then I'm gently beginning to help people turn the perspective to what Jesus said when he said, don't just look at the log, the speck in your brother's eye, look at the log in your own eye. And see, that's the tricky part, is to help people feel safe enough that they will actually want to begin to self-reflect about their part in their contribution to the conflict. And then if I can, and it usually takes another meeting or two, and they'll come back and I'll just ask, well, what came to you? What came to you when you listened about these issues? Did anything come to you? And typically, if we do open up and we are willing to hear another perspective from within, and our defenses come down, I think typically we will begin to be aware of, we said this, we did that was really hurtful or wrong in relation to the people we're in conflict with. And then what happens is you begin to work with that to help them develop empathy. And that's the key. When people can begin to actually develop empathy. So what I do, it's called coaching, conflict coaching. I lead them through a 2-3-step process of preparing them to meet in a mediation with the person they're in conflict with. But I'm doing it with both people the same way. So by the time we're in the mediation, they've already gone through that process. So by the time we sit face to face, they're able to not only tell their story, but they're really aware that they need to hear and receive the other person's story.
They are aware that there are two sides to the story.
Yeah, in one of the trainings I've received, they say there's no such thing as a conflict where a person is 100% responsible. And even if I'm only responsible for 2% and they're 98%, I'm responsible for those 2%. That should become my focus. That's what I need to be aware of. That's what I need to look at. That's what I need to be willing to openly, quote, confess. So then once that begins to happen, where people begin to receive each other and own things where they've hurt each other and receive the truth of another, that's when the walls come down. And it's amazing when it happens. People actually begin to hear from the other that person actually is getting how they hurt me, because they're articulating it now. And likewise, and they begin to be able to work together, and they begin to forgive each other, and they begin to let go, and then they can begin to work together on how do we go forward together? How can we be together?
So really, to create the context in which people can begin to articulate what's bothering them really is an incredibly helpful thing to do, which is why therapy ultimately is a great process. And having been in therapy for quite many years, I cannot recommend it strongly enough.
Right.
Yes, there are a lot of weeks where you don't talk about anything of substance. Those weeks aren't why you're doing it. It's the weeks in between where suddenly you begin to figure stuff out about yourself.
Right.
Because that really is a long-term grind.
Right. And again, it's something we have to grow to want. We have to, as you know, you have to get to a place where you realize, I need this.
Indeed.
And we need this.
We are the horse that could be led to water.
Exactly. And even your experience with the actual horse, I love the pictures, because it was such a visual of even that horse experiencing you as a safe presence by how you were within your body, that allowed that horse to feel safe to come and nuzzle up to you. I think that's true for people. And what's so sad is we're not willing to create that safety for others, especially when we're in conflict.
So I imagine your success rate's pretty good. You've most of the time, well, You get people talking to each other, you get them to reconcile, and I would imagine that in many situations, the deal that everyone makes doesn't make anyone happy, but it's the deal that holds the community together. Is that really where it falls?
Yeah, you actually get, once you get through the relational portion, which is the key, what I've described, and people actually begin to hear and own and confess ways they've hurt each other. And I've seen then at that point tears flow and people, it's like there's this release of
Sure,
pain.
sure.
It just, you can see it washing out of them and out of the room.
It's a lot to hold in. It's a lot to hold on to. It's hard.
And then once that happens, you take a deep breath, and then I facilitate a negotiation process where they together brainstorm, okay, how are we going to go forward where we're for each other? Because we're here together working on this staff, or we're here together in this family or this marriage or whatever the relational partnership is. We want to have a good future. So then it's them. I just facilitate a brainstorming session where maybe like on a big piece of paper on the wall, I'll just say, hey, just spitball, just throw out, okay, so what are the things you think you need in new ways in order to have a good future together? And they just start throwing out ideas. And then after that, I'll say, okay, let's look at that. And then I want you both to agree, what are the most important things that you have to commit to, that you're going to be accountable to each other, you're going to actually name and give each other the freedom to support each other in living this out. And then they flesh that out, and then we actually write out a covenant. A covenant.
You're putting on paper what everyone's committing to.
Yeah, and then in the end, they look at it. Maybe they take it home. Well, so take it home, sit with it, make sure this is really what.
It's like a new car contract or a used car contract. Come on, man, you got to read that fine print.
Well, because it's helping people get to the place of actually wanting in their heart and soul to say, I want to work at this. Because the reality is, we can know what's right and then go home and do the opposite.
Talk is so cheap, isn't it?
Exactly. And so we have to create into the process a way to help kind of memorialize it. You know, it's like when Joshua led the people across the river into the promised land, and they went back and they pulled rocks out of the river and they piled up rocks. So later they could go back and look at those rocks and be reminded, you know, that word remember it runs throughout the scriptures of, we have to remember what we're about because we've gotten away from it. And so it's basically the same idea.
All right, let me ask this though. I get that in a church context, because you know what you're able to do there is meet with people individually, focus on the relational restoration and then the covenant. But honestly, as I look, and Alan knows this, I'm much more cynical about politics than he is. But if we look at politics, what I see the process in politics is win at the ballot box, then develop laws or a covenant based upon your side's views, and shut the other side down and try to hold power as long as you can. And that sounds like a really different process than what you're talking about. And so what I'm wondering is, I mean, is there any way that within the political sphere, you've seen this kind of thing happen where people actually work on repairing the relationship before they throw out all the laws that they're going to develop and make people conform to? I mean, how does, I mean, and maybe I'm being too cynical on that, but I don't see how that process would work given our present political climate, regardless of who's in power.
Well, last time you guys met, you were talking at one point about Nelson Mandela. What an amazing human being he was. See, you need leadership like that to model a way of life that is about forgiveness and grace and inclusion, even when people have done the kinds of things they had done to him. And as you know, he got into trouble with his own people when he came out and came into leadership, because he did practice forgiveness with the whites that had terrorized him and his own family, his people, and his own people couldn't understand that. And see, that's our normal way of responding, is retaliation, quote, justice. And the reality is, and this is what I love about our faith as Christians, is the only answer really for the ills of the world is forgiveness. And forgiveness doesn't mean we look the other way. It starts with the truth. We have to look honestly at the truth of what's happened, what's been done, what's wrong. You know, like the thing with racial justice right now in the world, and especially the unique story in America with slavery. That is being dealt with in a way that's creating all sorts of problems in the church, because you have a lot of what's called white fragility in the white church with these true stories of what has happened to black people in the history of our nation, that is being named in a way that it needs to be named. You have to start with the truth of what's been done that's been wrong, and people have to be willing to receive that.
Can I
Yeah.
jump in here, because I think you said earlier, not every problem is not 100%. Now, I would argue that this is a problem where this says that's not true. Slavery in this country is a 100% right v wrong issue, where human beings are concerned. Oh yeah, I know the economy of this whole country could not have been built if not for slave labor. Yeah, okay.
Right.
Be that as it may, immoral is immoral is immoral. It's just how it is. Now, we can forgive ourselves as much as we want because it hurts to feel bad about ourselves. But okay. Part of what I think this country is bumping into, just my opinion, is the fact that this is one of those 100% issues. It is. And part of this country will not go there. It wants to see, for some reason, fault in those who were enslaved. It wants to fault them for being here. Right. All right, we ended slavery, now go away, which is frankly what Abraham Lincoln wanted to do. Yeah, I mean, even when we're good, we're not as good as we should be.
Right. Well, but I think, Alan, that's the key right there. None of us are as good as we should be. And so I think the thing that's lacking in these ongoing conflicts, whether it's in the political world, national issues, local issues, whatever the issues are, right down to our home life, is it kind of goes back to the thing about denial. We really tend to practice a defensive posture.
Oh, indeed.
And we don't practice what's an essential posture in spirituality, which is humility, a teachable spirit. But see, a person can't become humble and teachable and open to looking honestly at themselves and their part in the problem until they've developed somewhat in their spiritual journey. And that's part of growing spiritually, is becoming more humble, self-reflective, willing to own my part, so forth. And so I think that, in my role, my role, when I am given the opportunity, I'm invited into whatever situation, that's why I always start by saying it's an incredible privilege. I'm to be in these sacred places that mean so much to you, because the things we are in conflict are about, those are things we care about.
Well, and it strikes me too that as we're talking about this, that, and this is the funny thing, because, a lot of times faith is seen as a crutch, or has been spoken of as a crutch. And there definitely are situations where it's a weaker option that some people take. I'm just going to believe or something rather than dealing with the situation. But what you're talking about in the process you're talking about, in the spirituality you're talking about, and the healing you're talking about, actually requires courage.
Oh, yeah.
And more courage than just going out and denouncing whoever it is your enemy.
Right.
This is something that's more courageous than powering up on the people that are a threat to you, because you're actually having to look at yourself and then look at the possibility of reconciling with the people that you see as a threat. And it just strikes me that's I think part of where spirituality and healing come together, under some courageous decisions that you have to make, and that there are actually other ways people approach conflict that are less courageous and less spiritual.
Well, it's actually avoidant.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Avoiding what though? What are you avoiding? What would you say you're trying to avoid?
I think we're avoiding things that if we actually sit with in quiet, that's where we get back to silence and solitude and stillness that we struggle to sit in. Because I think intuitively we know if we actually open up to what's deep inside in relation to our beliefs and our actions, our behavior with others, what's going on in the world, I believe that the spirit that is at work will rise up if we will truly open up to hearing that.
I agree with you. The most efficient therapist any of us can have is silence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, silence. Take away all the distraction and really make us spend some time inside our own heads, really inside our own heads.
But with the focus on what is it I need to be aware of, not ruminating on what's wrong with the other group or the other person.
You're not. There's no one else to justify anything to.
Yeah.
You don't have anyone to go ouch when you pinch them. It's you. You're the one who has to say ouch when you pinch. And really, I think people who are not pathologically incapable of telling the truth
Right.
will find themselves looking into themselves.
Yeah, and it gets back to what you said, Alan, about that fundamental principle of do unto others. It's about developing empathy. It's about developing the awareness that, hey, even though I'm convinced I'm right and you're wrong, the reality is I'm human, and I might not be completely right. Maybe I do need to make a little room for hearing and receiving my quote enemy's perspective. And that's the only way I think we can sort out some of these issues.
It's funny. In my other life, as a writer, I have a blog, a book called How to Live Bullshit Free, and the long story short, 3 days before Christmas 2016, I came within literal inches of offing myself. And in the aftermath, as I got better, it occurred to me that really everything that led me down that road was bullshit. I had really, it was the thing about depression is that it reduces your perspective to nothing. And you become utterly convinced that these voices in your head are speaking the absolute truth, that you have, nobody wants you here. These are lies. It's lies. But the thing about rebounding is that having discovered how close bullshit came to doing me in, first of all, I thought that was sort of hilarious, but then after I stopped laughing, I looked around and I thought, all right. In what other ways is my bullshit, because that was my bullshit, that there was no one else's bullshit did that to me, it was me, mine. In what other ways is this harming my day-to-day life? And I turned my attention completely away from anybody else's. I said, forget about anybody else's. They got as much bullshit as I got. And I turned my attention to only dealing with my own. And a strange thing happened from that day forward. I got happy.
Yeah.
I suddenly got it because I'm dealing with my stuff is hard enough, but I don't worry about anybody else's. And man, what a relief that is. That's their problem. Now, from time to time when they need help and they ask for help, I'm there. But if it's not asked for, I got my own to deal with.
Right.
And I think this is kind of along the lines of what my cruder version of your version. This is still we're still talking about the same process of deal with you first.
Right.
And when you find, first of all, you'll stop judging everyone else. You will. It's suddenly you'll see their stuff in the context of your stuff. It's all relative. It's all relative. It's all relative. All right. I have experienced this past hour. I know exactly why Randy feels about you the way that he does. I feel strangely calm and strangely healed. You have a remark. Your voice, your demeanor, everything about you is you are well suited to your chosen path. I have one question.
Yes, sir.
All right, what really pisses you off?
What? Wait, say that again.
What really pisses you off?
Well, it's ironic, based on all that we're talking about, that I know to be true, that I work at living, because it has to be, like you said, a way of life. But what still pisses me off is when people don't see things my way.
I love the honesty.
Amen, brother. Amen, brother.
Love the honesty.
I go there so fast.
Yeah.
But see, now I understand I have to practice the discipline of awareness when I go there. And I go to a place of judgment because somebody's not responding to my idea the way I want them to. I have to stop, be aware, slow it down, and then process that, hopefully quickly enough that I can stay in the conversation and not have to say, I'm sorry, I got to go, and go process it and then come back.
So wait. What I hear you saying, though, is if we go through reconciliation one time, we're not done. That there's still going to be more times that we have to go through that process again. Is that what you're telling us? This isn't a one time and you're done thing?
Sorry. So it's like the vaccine. They're going to have to be booster shots.
That's right.
And on that bombshell.
This is why I start every day sitting out by my pond, having 20 minutes of silence and meditation and reflection so I can get grounded before I go into the day. And then I need to remember to do that at points in the day to bring me back, because I tend to get pulled away from that place because I'm dealing with what I'm dealing with out in the world.
These are invaluable life lessons, regardless of which side of which aisle you sit on in whatever church or not. I personally thank you.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Yeah.
I feel like we just scratched the surface. But
as always.
I want to try to get this out to folks, because I think just this conversation can have the impact on them that Alan was talking about. But I think it also gives you some ideas on where do I start. Well, at the very least of saying, actually, I think I'd like to be a person that would have something to bring to all the kind of problem situations in the world today that would actually help heal it. I mean, we all have our points of view. We all know who's right in the different cultural issues, etc. But to actually be able to come in and say, maybe I should try this from a little different angle to see if I don't get better results than just coming in, dukes up, ready to fight.
To see that there is another angle.
Yeah. Because I think the what I'm hearing is, there's actually, if we major on the relationship, then we're going to find a solution. But we've actually got to deal with the relational part if we want to get to a solution that's actually going to work. And I feel like that I'm just excited about that, and I want to see more of us really working toward let's work the relationship, and then we can come up with a solution to these problems that are critical problems. And
hey, how about we pick this up in a subsequent conversation?
I think we certainly could, and I know we'll have time, even if we just wait for the next midterm elections, we'll have a time where we can call Mike in and have a really good discussion.
No
that will
doubt.
be very important. So
thank you for joining us, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Good to be with you guys.
Everyone, we'll see you all next time.
Bye.